Things just took a major turn for the Toronto Maple Leafs as we have multiple Leafs updates to go over today as we are now just days away from the postseason beginning. And with their final regular season game tonight, we have some updates from Craig Berube that have fans absolutely fired up. We're going to break down those updates and discuss what they mean going forward as we are entering the most important postseason run of the Core 4 era. So stay tuned for all that this episode. But before we get into it, if you're part of the 71% who aren't subscribed to the channel, this is the place to be for daily Leafs content. Of course, we'll have a stream following tonight's game. We'll have streams following every single game in the postseason. So this is the place to be for daily Leafs news and coverage. Ladies and gentlemen, let's dive right into it. We knew we were going to get some updates today surrounding some players, but things took a major turn. And this time, ladies and gentlemen, it is for the good. You can see this here. We finally have some positive news. Leafs coach Craig Berube confirms that he's sticking with the same lineup tonight in the regular season finale, but he is, quote, fairly confident, end quote, that OEL, Jake McCabe, and David Kampf will be ready for game one. So in a bit of a surprising turn here, at least especially for me, not only is OEL available, which we expected, Jake McCabe is also available, and David Kampf is going to be available as well for game one, bearing any unforeseen circumstances here, but they're all going to be in, which changes the landscape a little bit now because I was kind of expecting, and both of us were, that David Kampf was not going to be in. Darius, everybody is healthy and the Leafs are ready to, this is just fantastic news all the way around, and honestly, I'm a little bit surprised that all three are ready to go for game one. I expected, especially based on the comments regarding David Kampf, that he was going to miss a little bit of time.
Yeah, the whole time I wasn't too worried in terms of Jake McCabe and OEL because the language they were using besides yesterday in our video we covered yesterday, I was starting to get a little worried, but the language they were using suggested that they would be back for the playoffs, which I think was fine because you're giving them a rest, which is fine because you're going to get beat up as a defenseman in the playoffs. So I was actually totally on board with that, and I wasn't too worried because of everything they said. Now, yesterday we got some different information, but now today it's looking like they can A, return some of them tonight if they want. I don't know if that's going to happen. And B, they will be in game one of the playoffs. And David Kampf is a very nice surprise to hear that that's happening because we've heard nothing about him since he got injured. It was that he got injured and then he basically disappeared and he's been skating, but there was no update on his timeline. So he could be coming back for game one of the playoffs. And I think that's huge for the Leafs because it really solidifies all their centermen, I think, going into the first round of the playoffs against the Ottawa Senators, and then they can kind of figure out the lineup the rest of the way from there. And there's still a lot up in the air, right? Is Holmberg going to be in the lineup? We don't know if Robertson's going to be in the lineup. He had a pretty good stretch of games here, but we don't know what's going to happen with Pacioretty, right? So we're getting some questions answered with David Kampf possibly being available for game one. So that's going to be fun, but we're just days away. We don't know exactly what the lineup's going to look like tonight in terms of like as the game goes on because they're still fiddling with things. We know that the game will start with the same lineup, but I wonder how they kind of, fiddle with things. And like we'll get to in a second, Joseph Woll starting tonight, like you predicted there, Nick, the other day. And, that should be fun to watch as well. And they haven't named a starter for game one, but I feel like that's Berube playing head games or mind games, I should say, with the Ottawa Senators rather than them not knowing.
Yeah, and there was an optional skate today. All three were on the ice, and you mentioned it. They're not going to be in the lineup, at least bearing any unforeseen changes towards game time. They're going to be rocking with the same lineup as yesterday or the game before that, the last game, not yesterday, a couple days ago. But you mentioned it now. This game means nothing as it pertains to the standings. Nothing can change here. I'm really hoping all you have to hope for watching tonight's game is no injuries. That's basically the number one thing for both sides really at this point. Of course, you're going up against a team that isn't in the hunt. But at the same time, Joseph Woll is going to be in net tonight, which is a pretty, that's a positive thing. Maybe he, out of everybody, Joseph Woll can probably take the most from this game, maybe a couple of third and fourth liners, but they're going to be rocking with the same lineup. But Joseph Woll's in net at the morning skate and is projected to make the team's final regular season start of the year at home against Detroit. And I guess you mentioned it in the postseason. Pacioretty's probably going to return, though there's been some rumblings about him maybe not getting into the lineup. Of course, now with David Kampf coming back, who gets replaced in that fourth line? We know that Craig Berube has liked Lorentz and Lawton kind of playing together and playing really well off of each other. Max Domi was in the second line there. I can see Pacioretty fitting into the third line and Pontus Holberg coming out. We talked about it on the stream. I know you weren't there in the last stream, but Nick Robertson probably getting taken out just because of the volatility of his play and the penalties he's been taking. So this is going to be very interesting now. And with the way that things have changed here, things have definitely taken a turn for the better. They have more depth available. And as it pertains to tonight's game, again, you look at the Leafs dressing room. They have a bunch of different things. Like the energy is good around the team, but also for the lineup tonight, Craig Berube did come out and say that the lineup's going to remain the same. But I'm really hoping that the minutes stay down as it pertains to the first really top six, but even just everybody in general spreading out the minutes and the game you can use it as a, I'm sure they're going to work on some things, but I don't want to see anybody injured, especially now that it's been confirmed that everybody's going to be healthy for game one and round one against the Senators on Sunday.
Yeah, well, whoever's on the third line and fourth line tonight, congratulations, because you're the first and second line, because you're going to be playing those minutes unless they're special teams, right? Where obviously Marner and Matthews and those guys will take over on the penalty kill and the power play. But I would imagine that they're going to play a lot, the third and fourth line that is tonight, because they're going to try some things. I'm sure they want to see who plays well with who in terms of more minutes, because in the playoffs, it's a little bit different, right? I feel like in the regular season, the Leafs really rely on a couple guys too much, but come playoff time, all four lines have got to be rolling. They're all going to maybe not equal ice time, but there's going to be way more flow to the game, I think, in back and forth action. So it's just the nature of things. So I think they're going to kind of see who plays well with who and kind of make a decision based on that. Again, Pacioretty, we don't know what he looks like in terms of being in the lineup. Obviously, he's been practicing, and I'm sure they have an idea if he's going to play or not. But who comes out? I think that's the biggest question mark, right? You made a good point about Robertson and the penalties he takes, but there's still a high ceiling there. He can still offer a lot for you in scoring. He didn't last playoffs, but I feel like he's playing with more of an edge this year that will allow him to get to the net and get those opportunities. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens with that. Holmberg as well, right? He's been playing okay. They found some chemistry, like you said, with Lorentz and Lawton there. A lot of people don't like Lawton on the fourth line because of how much you gave up for him. But hey, if it works, it works. It doesn't matter where anyone's playing at this point in time. Salary doesn't matter anymore. The Leafs are heading into the playoffs. All that matters is if you win hockey games in the best lineup possible. Matthews, what if he was hurt and he was playing on the fourth line because of that? As long as they're winning, everything's fine, right? So if Lawton's found chemistry there on the fourth line, that's fine. Keep him there. So it's gonna be fun to see what happens tonight. Should be a fun game. Joseph Woll gets the last start. Obviously, last game of the year. They've clinched. Everything's good. We're all feeling good. We know who the Leafs are playing. So let's just enjoy the last game against Detroit, original six matchup, and last one at home too.
Yeah, and speaking of the original six, for the first time in NHL history, the Canadiens and the Maple Leafs are the lone original six teams to make the postseason. So a very interesting stat there. Of course, the Habs did make the postseason yesterday. Officially, they're going to be playing the Washington Capitals. I mean, regardless, the Leafs, and again, I see a lot of you guys asking in the comment section, Chris Johnson did tweet that the Leafs are going to be playing on Sunday. So it seems, and that is confirmed now, that the teams that are playing on Saturday are the teams that finished their season yesterday. So teams that are playing on Thursday, their final game, which is, of course, us and the Habs, I believe, as well. Regardless of that, those games are going to be on Sunday. So 7 p.m. Eastern is kind of the rumor that's been floating around. We haven't gotten a confirmed schedule yet. As soon as we do, we'll have a video on that covering it for you all. But yeah, you mentioned it. It's going to be very exciting, and just kind of touching on what the sentiment is around the team right now. Some people like to bring up the 3-0 Sens over Leafs in the regular season, and as if it's an indicator of what will happen in the playoffs. One look at who played, and you didn't. And you pretty much get the whole story. So there's obviously Leafs fans saying that. There's some Senators fans and other fans saying that, the Leafs, they constantly have ghosts of course, the past there on the first season. But again, I think the biggest guy here is going to be, or one of the biggest guys, is going to be Chris Tanev and Matthew Knies. And Chris Tanev ranks fourth in the league among defensemen in defensive rating per Cert Dom's model. He has the second lowest offensive zone faceoff percentage too among defense. I just want to hear your thoughts on this. This was obviously the big acquisition in the offseason was Chris Tanev. And of course, he was fantastic in the regular season. We saw how bad the Leafs were when he was absent. This is where he's going to shine, especially against an inexperienced Ottawa Senators team. You need to be able to contain. They're going to be, they're going to come out fired up. They're going to come out excited. Brady Tkachuk, all these different things. The Leafs have way more talent. They have way more skill. They should take care of business. And I think something that they've been missing in the past was really a shutdown defensive defenseman. Of course, they've had Morgan Riley carry them at some points. But as it pertains to a shutdown, especially over the past few years, I think Chris Tanev is going to be the biggest X factor for this team, alongside Jake McCabe as well, which has been their shutdown pair for the entirety of the season, besides the injuries they've both done.
Yeah, Chris Tanev is going to be a huge factor for the Leafs in the playoffs this year. They haven't had a defense core the entire time in this Matthews, Marner, Nylander era, right? Even with Tavares, it just hasn't happened. So when I saw that this morning, I thought that was super impressive. We know what he brings to the table, how good defensively he is, blocking the shots, eating pucks, all of that stuff. But he starts the majority of his time in the defensive zone, and he, is winning majority of his minutes on the ice. So he's great in transition. He's putting the puck, he starts in the defensive zone, but the puck is always being pushed to the offensive zone. He's again great in transition, and they're scoring more goals than not when he's on the ice. So I think that is very impressive, because if you start all your shifts in the offensive zone, you're scoring more goals. That makes sense. That makes total sense. Starting in the defensive zone majority of the time and still having that, I thought that was very impressive. And again, I'm so impressed, and I have been since the day he got here, of how good he is in transition, getting the puck up the ice to the forward. So he's going to be a huge factor in this. And another factor, another guy who's going to be a huge factor, probably the factor for the Leafs, is going to be Matthew Nyes, I think, in this series.
Yeah, you look at what Craig Berube had some comments. I think Matthew Nyes has surprised me how he's grown as a player and what he has accomplished this year. I'm not sure I pictured that. Not a surprise so much because the ability was there, but as a young guy to me, he's grown quickly, and he's grown very quickly. Sorry. And again, under Craig Berube, how he was going to develop and grow. We both saw it in the playoffs last year against the Boston Bruins. He kind of started to flourish into himself. This season was another step. I can't even begin to imagine A, what it's going to be like next year, but B, what it could be like next year if Mitch Marner ends up leaving and things like that, which obviously I'm not hoping for that right now, but there's a lot of factors here that might require Matthew Nyes to step up. And as it pertains to the playoffs, he's one of the Leafs' best players, and I think his game fits very well to what I'm assuming is going to be an physical hockey game. If anything, is the regular season any indicator of what we've seen between the two teams. So it's going to be a wild there. But yeah, Matthew Nyes, he's going to be the guy to look out for, I think, along with the Chris Tanev. But on the forward group, we know what Marner and Matthew are hopefully going to give, though, again, we never really know in the postseason. But Matthew Nyes now, this is the first year that he's really took a monumental step forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, going back to last season, you could kind of see it in the playoffs where you're like, this guy's going to be a player. Even going back to his first playoff series against Tampa, you're like, this guy is going to be a player. But even last year, you're like, at least myself, speaking for myself, I was like, I don't know if he can play with the big boys. I don't know if he can, if the speed is there, you have to be quick to play with guys like that. And I feel like he was falling behind at times. He was still very impressive. But this season, he's taken a ginormous step forward. He looks like he belongs on that line. He adds something to that line, his own personal flair to that line and the physicality. And I can only imagine what he's going to bring to the table when the games matter, because he always steps it up. We've seen it, right, when the games matter. So it's going to be awesome to watch. And heading into the future, like, sky's the limit still. Like, he has so much that he can still work on and perfect in terms of his game. So I'm really excited. He's going to be the X factor, I think, for both teams. Like, if he's going and he's making a difference, like, they can really win this series and they could wrap it up quickly, I think, if he's really rolling.
Yeah, let us know what your thoughts are. Days away, we'll have a stream following tonight's game, the final regular season game of the season. So let us know what your thoughts are. And we finally had some good news regarding the injuries. So thank you guys for watching. See you later.